So let's talk about car bombing. I mean, first of all, it's something that mentally scary, right? To get into a car and it blows up. Now, I mean, as Muriel Pfeil's death certificate says, she was killed within seconds. So there's that sort of mercy thing going on, but realistically, it's a horrible way to die. Cut. The question is, of course, what do you think of when you think of a car bomb? All of us probably have this image in our head of what it means, and it depends a lot on when you came into the world, as it were. Some people, for example, think of car bombs, they associate them with the Middle East, and certainly there's a history of using those kinds of weapons in the Middle East, and part of that is this, how do I want to put it, this imbalance of power. Car bombs are thought by some to be the poor man's fighter jet, okay? There's another sense of car bombs associated with the Irish Republican Army and their fights with Great Britain for independence for the Irish people in Northern Ireland. They were used quite often, in fact, Dublin, cities like that, against, of course, the British constabulary. Okay? What else? Well, mafia. Mafia comes to mind, and it was used fairly often in mafia circles. I mean, the pictures in my brain, of course, go to like guys who are shot in restaurants, or, you know, and they're just laid out on the street for everybody to see, because it's not just a killing, it's a signature. It's a sign, an advertisement. Don't mess with us, or you will end up like this guy. There are other examples of car bombings, necessarily. We have them affiliated with gang warfare, not just mafia, but sort of gang warfare. Certainly in Mexico, there was a lot of that, has been historically. Part of the reason, of course, is car bombs are among the weapons that can be used. One, very sneaky. It's not like some little sign that they hang up and say, this car is bombed, number one. Number two, they're fairly inexpensive compared to other methods. And third, and really importantly, the person who's doing the car bombing can remove themselves physically from the area. If you shoot somebody, you're pretty much going to be in the vicinity. You're going to be pretty close. If you stab somebody, you got to be really close. But a car bomb, especially if they're sort of electronically triggered, you can be distant. You don't have to be close, because you can just set them up so you turn the key and that closes an electric circuit and the car bomb goes off. And that's what we find in the Muriel Pfeil case. Or do we? See, there was a lot of speculation, because it just seemed like, how did these times line up? She was driving that car back and forth for the better part of a day, half a day at least, with her kid in it. And it seemed to some observers, hey, you know, her kid wasn't killed. Her kid was not in that car. So whoever was doing this, allegedly, perhapsly, was making sure that Scotty, her son, Neil, and Muriel's son, was not in the car when the bomb went off. So that went back and forth. And of course, there were other issues trying to define what kind of weapon was it. I mean, you'd think, well, it's easy. It's dynamite. And well, it could be dynamite. It could be. You know, we're in Alaska. It's oil country. The dynamite is abundant. In fact, there's on the record examples of theft of dynamite. And moreover, we see another car bombed in Fairbanks within this same time period. And so you got to investigate that as well. Then, of course, you do the investigation. You start. FBI is involved. ATF's involved. Anchorage police are involved. They take the car. They just grab every little scrap they can from the bomb scene. This all needs to be analyzed. And it doesn't take very long between the time of the bombing and people come forward and identify themselves as suspects, or not even suspects, like, I done it. You know, one guy in particular comes forward. And you got to take that seriously, right? Guy came forward. Okay. So you have the problem of course, identifying who done it, and then who done it. And the interesting thing is, when you go through the history of car bombs, you don't really see a lot of cases of, interpersonal beefs. It rises to these organizational level, right? The IRA, it's an organization. It's a terrorist organization, or defined as, they would call themselves freedom fighters, and okay, whichever way you want to go with that. The mafia, those are kind of personal, like, you guys mess with us, we're going to blow you up. You again, in the Arab countries, it's, the Lebanese against the Israelis. It's Hamas versus the Israelis. There's this imbalance. And so those are the situations we look at. We don't really look at too much in the history of car bombing, it being an interpersonal kind of thing, husband, wife, or something like that. Now, here's the sideways look at it. What better way, if you were going to disguise a murder, than to make it look like something it is not? Right? Why would a husband kill his wife in this kind of way? Right? Why would a husband kill his wife in this kind of way? So there's that angle. And of course, in Alaska, again, there's people you can look at. For example, two of the people who parked their cars in that lot, a journalist and a judge, were both implicated in going after the Teamsters Union in Alaska, because there seemed to be a sense of some criminality involved, especially in Fairbanks, and we can document that. We'll show you that. So a lot of suspects, a lot of potential here, and the one that doesn't look like it actually is, husbands and wives. Women are more often killed by intimates than they are strangers. We know this statistically over and over and over again. Again, I'll show you that. We'll put that down in writing. So here we go. A confusing melange. Oh, that's a fancy word. A confusing mix. Okay, so here we go. A confusing mix of possibilities. And if there's anything that's clear, is that the police, and I don't just mean Anchorage police, I mean including the FBI, including ATF, got bogged down in this investigation. I've often speculated as to where it was that the bomb was installed, or the components for the bomb, to be more accurate. Now, across the street from Muriel's business probably the less ideal. There's a lot of people there, back and forth. There's courts there. And the risk is that you linger there too long and somebody notices you. And later on, when there's a bombing, they have that memory. So I'm looking for another place. And after visiting Muriel Pfeil's neighborhood last year and driving it and lingering there for a little bit, it looked to me like my speculation that this might be a better place seemed to have some merit. First of all, it's a very short street. It's not a busy street. It's a residential street. Also important, the houses immediately across the street and next to it are all duplexes. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me that the people who live there are renters. Sometimes, often, renters are less attentive to their surroundings because they don't have quite the investment or the commitment. Again, speculation. Now, what's important about the duplex Muriel was renting was a very wide and deep parking spot next to the house. Deep and wide. Actually, the perfect kind of spot, don't you think, for someone to come and install a bomb without being noticed. Now, of course, there's the question of, wouldn't she hear? We've already learned how easy it is to open the hood. All you need is a coat hanger. Secondly, someone who's experienced could do it actually fairly quickly. And importantly, it doesn't have to be a live bomb, because that piece is going to take place on the day of the bombing. And you can see from the photos here and the stop motion camera effect I have that place right there next to her duplex, and by the way, she lived on the top floor, so more acoustically separated from wherever this work is going to be going on, looks pretty ideal.